Hey guys, today we're going to work on the distributive property of multiplication. Just to remind you, we've already looked at the zero property, the identity property, the commutative property, and the associative property. To remind you completely, the zero property is when you multiply things by zero, numbers by zero, and they equal zero. So no matter what you times by zero, the answer is always going to be zero. The identity property is where you multiply things by 1. So 1 times 7 is going to equal the other factor other than 1. So 1 times 7 would equal 7. 100 times 1 would equal 100. The commutative property is where you can switch the two factors and they will be the same product. And then the associative property is where you associate numbers together using king parentheses, as we say. Today we're going to learn about the distributive property. So the word distribute helps me understand what the vocabulary is. So this first picture shows money being distributed to people. So if you have a job, your boss is going to give you money. Also, I want you to think about is if Mrs. Greason distributed cookies. That means she handed cookies out and she gave everybody an equal amount of cookies. The real definition of distributive property is a multiplication fact that can be decomposed into the sum of two smaller facts. And this is a very hard thing to grasp, a very hard concept to grasp, but it will make more sense when we get our hands on it and we get to practice it. So let's do that. 15 times 4. What you're going to see is that there's going to be a larger number and a smaller number. Sometimes they don't have to be tens and ones in one place, but it can. So meaning there's sometimes a 2-digit by a 1-digit. Sometimes you might need to use distributive property for a 1-digit times a 1-digit. This one we have a 2-digit by a 1-digit. So we're going to think about what factors we want to split and what factor we want to keep. So I'm going to split the harder factor, the greater factor. So 15 would be the greater factor, and the factor that's not too hard is going to be 4 because it's just a smaller number and it will be easier to multiply things by it. So I have 15 times 4. I want you to take a look at this. Right here is a formula. I always, when I'm doing distributive property, write that on my paper so I know that I'm going to fill it in. What we have is a parentheses, a multiplication sign, a parentheses, a plus sign, a parentheses, a multiplication, and another parentheses. Sounds confusing, but when you look at it like this, it's a little easier. There's half of the equation, and there's the other half of the equation with a plus sign in the middle. So we're going to look at the factor to split, 15. And we are going to ask ourselves, how can I split this larger number into an easier number to multiply? So I'm going to use 10 plus 5 or 5 plus 10 because 15 broken down into tens and ones is 10 and 5. So for the sake of right now, we're going to use 10 plus 5. What I'm going to do with those numbers now is I'm going to place them into our equation builder. I'm going to drag that 10 over and drop it into the first section. I always call this the first position of the first parentheses. Now this other 5 is going to be dragged and dropped into the the first position of the second parentheses. So I've dropped that in. Now if you look at that, before I move on, look at that and see how that 15 is split up. Often we're going to try to split up that 4, but we don't have to. The factor that we're going to keep is the 4, so we're going to put them in both of those places beside in the parentheses. So we have 10 times 4 plus 5 times 4. Now that we have numbers in it, the equation doesn't look as hard. So now what we're going to do is we're going to work on parentheses. As you know, Mr. King parentheses always goes first. But what do we do when there's 2? Well, you solve one, and then you solve the other before you add them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 10 times 4 together, and then I'm going to do 5 times 4 together, and then I'm going to add both of the products. So 10 times 4 is 40, and 5 times 4 is 20. When I add those together, I get 60, which means that 15 times 4 is equal to 60. Now you are going to pause and solve this on a piece of notebook paper. Your expression is 23 times 5. So I'm going to give you 10 seconds. Pause this video, solve it on a piece of notebook paper. Refer back to the video if you need help again, if you need to see this thing go through it one more time. Alright, your time's up. We're going to solve this together, and then you're going to have a chance to practice on e-class. So I'm going to split up the 23, and I'm going to keep the 5. I'm going to keep the 5. I've decided to split up the 23 because the 23 is a greater number, and I know I can split that into 10s and 1s, and it would be 20 and 3. So what I've done is I've created a 20 and a 3, and I've used my equation builder, and I'm just putting my numbers inside of the equation lines. Now I'm going to take that 5 and put it in both of the second positions. Notice how I'm not breaking up the 5. I'm not decomposing the 5. The 5 stays where it's at. It just gets split. It gets put into 2 different spots. Now I'm going to do these separately. I'm going to parentheses these separately. So 20 times 5 is 100. 3 times 5 is, you guessed it, 15. So now I'm just going to add it together. You should be getting this in your head by now. You should have 115. Now I know that was very difficult, so I'm going to attach more videos. If you need extra help, just reach out to me if I forget to post those, okay? If you guys need any help, please contact me by phone or email. Thank you guys.